So glad to see another great crowd. And so I'm going to turn the mic over to Diane, and she's going to fill you in on some great things.
Well, yeah, welcome. We've been busy down here. I think if you haven't, is anybody here for the first time?
Yes.
Oh, Nancy. So the building is in pretty good shape from what we sort of inherited, and we continue to work on things. At the moment, we're kind of fundraising. We're trying to raise some funds to fix the water. If you live in Lincolnville, you probably got the same water we've got here. It's kind of orange most of the time. Pretty nasty. Just look at your underwear. Exactly. So anyway, we're in that process. We're going to get a whole filtration system, and we're getting a submersible pump into our 147-foot deep well. It's out here. So anyway, that's our latest project. Meanwhile, we work every Friday. There's a group of volunteers that are busy digitizing our collection, which is the big thing that's on my mind. I know that some of the most important things that we own at this historical society are on paper. They're photos or they're documents. We store them in cardboard boxes. We put them on wooden shelves in our 170-year-old wooden unoccupied building. Think about it. I do every day. So our big goal is this winter and going forward is to get as much of that material online or on the cloud or wherever it goes when you digitize it and send it up there, so that it's all protected somewhere. Meanwhile, we still have paper copies, and you can see them, and I certainly much prefer to look through a photo album than a file on the computer, but that's, anyway. Is that enough?
Diane, you have a...
Yes.
Why don't you talk about the next fundraising meal?
Oh, thank you, Don. Yes. So our we're gonna do this every other month. We're gonna have a program here like this. And admission is free, and if you want to give us a donation, that's fine.
And that's right there.
Well, I was going to say.
I've already picked it up.
Yes, some people couldn't see it as signs this big. If you'd like to donate, that's lovely. If you don't, that's also fine. We are having, on the odd month, we're having a dinner we call the Beach Bistro. And her first one was last month. Anybody here raise your hand if you were at that dinner. It was pretty tasty. It was good. So we're having another one in January. I think it's the 12th, 13th. It's the middle of the month. On a Saturday night. It's a sit-down dinner. No plastic. Real tablecloths, napkins, cloth napkins, glasses.
And you buy your tickets in advance, and they only sell how many?
32. And we sold out in a day and a half last time. So, and it's $45 a person, which sounds pricey, but if you've eaten out lately, it's not. You have to bring your own bottle. And we'll post the menu coming up, and I'll give some warning this time. I guess we sent out and said you can make a reservation, and people just signed up, and then lots of people couldn't get in. So we're gonna give a little more warning, so if you can think about it and maybe know what's coming before we do the reservations. And I think that's about it. We'll see you next February.
We'll see you in January if you come to the dinner.
Oh, for the dinner.
And then if you go, in February, we are, the program...
He doesn't need a microphone.
No, in February, we're going to, as far as I know, our music will be Bella Barnes. She's, how old is she now? I lose track of her. When she first started, I think she was like 8 years old when I first started playing music with her. And I think she's like 15, 16 now. From Dot's Place down here, the daughter, and she writes her own music. She's a very talented young lady. And our guest speaker will be the one and only Kerry Hardy. And he will be talking about real Lincolnville residents. And so he will be talking about what it was like to live in the Duck Trap, Lincolnville area prior to
The invasion.
the invasion. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So, with that being said, I would like to introduce the very, very, very talented Corinne Gentry. And this is her daughter with her. And Corinne is from Salt Lake City, Utah, but now is a Lincolnville resident, lives in Lincolnville, and is planning on staying, as far as I know, for a long time, right?
Generations.
Generations. If you look her up, see, I'm one of those sneaky people where I look people up online, and I looked her up online, and oh my goodness gracious, was I blown away. She's been around and around and around and around and around. She's done a lot of musical stuff, been in a lot of bands and stuff, and I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks, Rosie. Don't Google me. It's not worth your time. You can just ask me if you have any questions. I'm gonna start the set with a little sweet song, and then maybe a couple stories and a couple more songs. I don't usually wear fur and a guitar strap at the same time, so forgive my adjustments. All right. Dance with me now, darling, make me lay. I've been hanging around this barroom, I can wait. I can wait now, darling, don't you know? Dance with me now, darling, sweet and slow. I've been here in the corner, playing it cool, but I could hang off of your shoulder like a fool. Like a fool now, darling, don't you know? Dance with me now, darling, sweet and slow. Take me home in a big car, drive it slow. We could turn off of the highway, who would know? Who would know in the morning's yellow light, where these two lost lovers were last night? Dance with me now, darling, make me lay. I've been hanging around this barroom, I can wait. I can wait now, darling, all night long. Dance with me now, darling, to this song.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Who wrote that?
I did not write that song.
Oh.
That's from a band named Hem. They came out of Brooklyn and they're disbanded now, sadly, but yeah, they were really great songwriters. I'm a little out of tune. And I don't have a tuner on me, so we'll just, you know. I love this gathering, and I feel super grateful to have moved to an area that values stories and storytelling and history. It feels very unsteady for me being somewhere where I have no roots. So we just moved here in March, and Liesl can verify this. We left everything we knew. All of our family, all of our friends, for a place we had really never been. We came here about a year ago to this area, just curious if there was somewhere else that would be more nourishing for our family than where we were. And we stayed in Belfast and discovered Lincolnville and bawled our eyes out because we felt like we were home. And kind of weird to feel like you're home in a place you've truly never been. And you now have to find jobs and make friends and find somewhere to live and all of those things, but we knew that it was the right thing to do for us. So I was raised to really value my roots. From being from Utah, you might rightly assume that I come from generations of pioneer stock and was raised to be very proud of that. Not the Mormonism side necessarily, but what my European ancestors did to come to Utah and settle. And so I was the 6th generation to live in that area and raising my kids there, and my husband as well. So you can imagine that uprooting, we really uprooted some pretty big things, and that's probably been the only hard thing leaving Utah, is not having that, because it's such a big part of my identity. But I'm here to set down new roots.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. And as much as my daughter Liesl misses her cousins and grandparents and friends and just where we came from, the mountains of Salt Lake City, she still says to me every day, "Mama, Maine is home." And loves it here.
Is that true?
So when I say we're here for generations, I really hope that. I feel inspired by my ancestors who uprooted themselves to go somewhere they'd never been, because it's what they knew was the right thing for their families. And they feel like I learned from them, and we're doing that now. So, yeah. Next song for you is about my grandparents. I get a lot of inspiration from my family history. It's about them, but it's also about me and my husband. And it's sort of some similar parallels there. It's called I Don't Mind. Rosie, I'm so out of tune.
Hold it.
Thank you. I don't know what your tuner's telling me to do. It's on? Okay.
Start at the bottom.
You just say yes or no. And am I good?
Yes.
Sounds flat. I'm used to tuning a violin. I mean, as you can see, I'm not a guitar player. And I make you believe I am because I have a really beautiful instrument. But I don't know really the first thing about them. I just use them to write songs, and then I've always played in bands with people who are wonderful guitar players, and they play guitar for me. It's better. It's better.
Good job, Rose.
Thanks. I don't mind, boy, living in the country. I don't mind, boy. God damn it, Rosie. What? It's still so out of tune.
It's all right. We don't know the difference.
I'm so sorry. It's.
You all want
maybe no one else can tell, but if you
Yeah.
can tell,
Start with the E string.
come on. What? It's flat? It's sharp?
It's too high. Pull it down.
Oh, that's worse. Now I'm just wasting everyone's time. So embarrassing.
We're good.
That's
It's fine. We won't notice the difference.
right. You didn't.
We won't notice the difference.
Yeah, cookies. I should have brought a bottle of whiskey to pass around. Next time. All right, here we go. I don't mind, boy, living in the country. I don't mind, boy, living in the country. Well, if I minded, boy, I know you'd take me into town. But I don't mind, boy, living in the country. And I don't mind, boy, sleeping on the floor. I don't mind, boy, sleeping on the floor. And if I minded, boy, I know you'd get me off the ground. But I don't mind, boy, sleeping on the floor or sharing our bed with all our babies. I don't mind, boy, working in the fields. I don't mind, boy, working in the fields. Well, if I minded, boy, I know you'd keep me in the house. But I don't mind, boy, working in the fields. And I don't mind, boy, being your baby. I don't mind, boy, being your baby. Well, if I minded, boy, I'd catch a train on out of here. But I don't mind, boy, being your baby. No, I don't mind, boy, being your baby. Thank you. Aw, thanks. Still out of tune, but you know. This is last tune for you. And it's a song I wrote for my sweetheart. We are actually high school sweethearts, and next week we will celebrate 15 years of being married. Yeah, we were babies when we got married. And then we had babies, and they're wonderful. But we met in high school, dated, and at the time we were Mormon. I get this conversation a lot when people learn we're from Utah. But that means that we spent 3.5 years apart, and we were not, because we were being Mormon missionaries at the time. And that was really important to both of us at that time in our lives. And part of that was that we weren't really in communication. So fell in love, dated, had the best friendship, and then did not see each other for 3.5 years. And I was in Brazil, he was in Korea, and we kind of barely missed each other as he came home from being a missionary and I left to go do the same thing. So it's a sweet love story, and this song's for him. And I'm gonna tack on a little Christmas tune at the end of it that I sang to him in a 4-part harmony with my aunt and my cousins at our wedding brunch. So here we go. Come swiftly and kiss me slowly, please. Take me wholly into your arms. Days fade into slowly golden hue. dresses sewn for the mountainside. I'll save my heart for you. Say you wait for me too. Sleep, come to me, for my mind is free. I can miss you into my dreams. We sing and sway, drifting carelessly, whirling star signs into the sky. I'll save my heart for you. Say you wait for me too. Time passes by as the red wing flies, wing beats, heartbeats, 2 by 2. When the day is nigh, know that I will find you. I'll save my heart for you. Say you will wait for me too. Will you come swiftly and kiss me slowly, please? Take me wholly into your arms. This is a song that my grandparents used to sing to each other over Christmas, which is why I sang it to Chase, my husband, at our wedding brunch. You are all I want for Christmas. All I want my whole life through. It's 2 out of 2, and I'm just gonna sing it a cappella. Each day is just like Christmas. Anytime that I'm with you, you're all I want for Christmas. And if all my dreams come true, then we will be together forever, and I'll spend every Christmas with you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
All right, so we put out in our ad that we would have 3,
We've only got
and we have 2, but we have a surprise. We have a surprise guest that's going to come up. Steve Hardy, come on out. So we're gonna ask these 3 individuals. Now Steve grew up on Youngtown Road but these, Randy grew up what I call, Canaan Road.
That's
And-
right.
And that, it's Canaan Road. They call it Duck Trap Road, but it's really Canaan Road. And so, the corner of Canaan and Tanglewood. So, and Jane, why, she grew up looking at the ocean every day of her life.
You still do?
Yeah, that's right. So I'm gonna start with Diane. You go ahead. Start with some questions.
Talk about surprise.
Start with Jane and we'll go through.
Boy. Jane,
Yes.
what's your most prominent memory of your childhood?
The year I got,
Just hold it. It's like holding an ice cream. Ice cream.
I got a brand new tricycle from Santa. I came downstairs in the middle of the night because I was just barely 5 years old, all excited about Christmas because I had heard Santa on the roof, reindeer and all. And I came down and peeked around the corner, which I wasn't supposed to do, and I almost screamed at the top of my lungs because there was this beautiful red and white tricycle. And it was the first time I'd ever had anything that was specifically for me. Everything else I'd ever had in my life were all hand-me-downs. And everything after that were all hand-me-downs. But it was 50 years later that my mother let out a secret that my father had, they bought the tricycle for $2 at a used toy shop. He had taken it out in the his blacksmith shop and repainted it and it looked brand new. And there's still ruts in the floor where I rode that tricycle around my house.
We'll go on in a second, but tell us which house is yours, where you live now and where you were living then.
I don't want anybody to know.
You don't want anybody to know?
No,
Most of us
my maiden
know.
name is, what?
Peter said most of you.
My maiden name is Flagg, and we live on the farmhouse right across from,
She glows.
no. Oh yeah, it used to be that, didn't it?
All right.
I've forgotten the one I knew. Anyway, it's where the school district building is now. Used to be the Lincolnville Dentist building, used to be Catherine Webster's house. Anyway, we're in that farmhouse with the big red barn sitting on top of the hill with a long driveway. And it's at basically the foot of what we call Pendleton Hill.
And don't block the end of the driveway.
Absolutely not. Do not turn around in it.
So,
No, that's my father speaking, honest to God.
so hand that to Randy.
Good.
And Randy, tell us where you grew up.
Right in the same house for the full time. From the time I was born, actually a couple years before, my mom and dad bought the house right on the corner of Tanglewood Road.
Canaan Road.
Canaan Road.
The what?
The old Johnson house.
That's correct.
What house?
Johnson.
The Johnson house.
Come on, keep up.
It's good.
So tell us about the Christmas, your Christmas that stood out, that like Jane did.
If you wanna go to Christmases, you've already kinda ruined
Sorry.
it. I didn't get a tricycle, but
I'm special.
my brother and I wanna think it was probably 1967, got brand new bicycles, which back in those days, brand new, and both of us. And it was a mild winter, and I remember being up and down Canyon Road on these brand new bicycles, because that was just, for us, now you had a way to get away. Which meant it was much easier to get to the beach.
Yeah.
Because growing up, we used to have to go up over Pendleton Hill and down through Mr. Flagg's. No, your dad always gave us permission.
Well, he knew who you were and you were polite about it.
Yes.
So you went
Otherwise,
through
you'd
the
have to
woods,
shut
yeah.
you.
And I will say, a number of years ago now, I remember stopping up to the Flag House, and Jane's dad was sitting over against the wall. He was getting a haircut.
Oh, no.
Oh, yes. And I actually wanted to stop to reintroduce myself because I'd been gone in the service and whatnot. Asked permission again if it was okay to come use the mountain trail that we always had up over. And he informed me that this was his death haircut because he didn't have long to go at that point. And I think both you and Doris were there at the time. And you talk about something that sticks in your mind when you hear that with not expecting it, but you know, I had immense respect for your dad and your mom.
Hardworking people,
Oh, salt of the earth and hardworking, absolutely.
like your folks,
And like who?
like your folks.
Very much, I
Yeah,
think,
yeah.
absolutely. But getting back to the question, it had to be that bicycle that both my brother Bill and I got in 1967, I'm pretty sure.
Well, I too got a bicycle one Christmas, and it was a brand new red bicycle. And I managed to take it apart. And I think I had to go up to the neighbors and get them to help me fix the chain on it.
So tell us the house where you grew up.
Youngtown Road, mostly grew up at the farmhouse where the big long field is, just down from Celador. Then we lived up on just across from Sandy's place for about 2.5, 3 years. And when my mother passed away, my dad and grandfather changed places because they didn't need the farm and they were going to Florida in the wintertime, and Dad was still milking the cows and everything. So we moved back down to the farm and stayed there until I went away to college. So
Start with Jane again. Jane, what was living at the beach area? As a kid, what did you do around the beach area? Did you tell us some of the things that you might have done around the beach area?
Can't do that. Now, our treat, I distinctly remember this, and for any of you that have been in salt water with a cut or scratch, you'll appreciate this, but we had chores to do first before we could play. And usually it was picking wild strawberries, working in the garden, picking raspberries, going into thorn bushes, scrapes and bumps and all this good stuff. Then we were allowed to go swimming. And I'll tell you, those cuts heal some fast. I don't think we allowed you at the beach, did we?
Ouch! What did that hurt, Jane?
We let you come over the hill.
I started working at a young age, so by probably about 8, I tried blueberry raking and I hated it, so
We all did.
I got asked not to come back because I'd sit in the field and eat. But anyways, worked a little bit for Blair Lamont. If any of you remember the Lamont house, digging dandelions out of his lawn and getting paid for that. I worked at the House of 5 Continents right up the street here.
What'd you do there?
We actually bottled his
Whatever.
dessert, sauces and whatnot. Put the labels on, boxed up.
Tell about that. That was a peculiar little business.
Well,
I mean, interesting.
I don't know what you want me to tell you. I mean, I just gave it in a nutshell. I mean, they had the house. I don't know who owns it now. And,
Richard Glock
okay.
house.
And
Oh, time
in,
long, I know.
in the house, in the house on the left, or the
right.
barn on
Yeah,
the left, is where they did their cooking of these desserts and sauces,
Yeah.
and then they would pour them in either WT or Tyler would come out and kind of supervise us a little bit.
Who else worked there?
Alice, but she stayed pretty much in the house most time, but between the three of them.
What I remember about that household is there was everything you ate there, and I think the sauces had a lot of booze in it. Remember that?
I never noticed, I wish I
Conservative.
Everything had.
So from there, I worked for Gilbert Harmon up on his property, which is actually in Northport. I liked some of the people in Northport, I guess, so.
Oh, that was a plug.
And then through the summers, of course, everybody worked at the Lobster Pound at one time or another, and I don't know how many people remember, there was a small takeout over by the ferry terminal, and there was two men from Pennsylvania used to come up, and they drove a hearse. And it was called the Grick, which was their take on Greek, but they actually had a push cart hot dog stand, and I used to push it from the ferry terminal down to probably about where Dwight Wass's place is at now, and used to sell hot dogs every day out of that hot dog stand.
When was that, Randy? I don't have any recollection.
You're pushing it probably 1974
It's here.
and 73, 74. There's a couple years where you don't remember that.
No.
Well, see, you're from away. So
I didn't have a bicycle. I never got away from the house.
Motion to adjourn.
Yeah. Steve,
Well, I never worked at the Lobster Pound, but my brother did.
No.
So he used to come home with the lobster bodies,
Yep.
and that was a big treat for us. We didn't get the claws or anything, just leftover lobster bodies, and we'd have a great time eating them, and he'd come with a whole big bag of them, you know. So it was pretty good. Because we had to work too on the dairy farm. We had dairy, then we had 5,000 laying hens, and in the spring we had 5,000 baby chicks to take care of. So between grading eggs, and shoveling cow manure, in the wintertime you had to shovel it twice. You had to put it into the carrier, take it out, dump it, and shovel it again, because if you didn't do that, the next night you couldn't dump it. So it was a lot of work, and you know, it was just busy stuff, especially the eggs. When you come home and you get off the bus and you go in and you open up the room door and you look in there, and the sea of eggs is all in baskets full of them, and we have to grade all of them before we can do anything else. So some days Dad would get them all graded, and some days he wouldn't get any of them graded. Just depended on what was going on in his life. So
Did you see eggs in your sleep, Steve?
no, but you know,
Unlike blueberries.
no, yeah. But also, we never ate an egg that wasn't cracked. All the eggs that were whole went to Boston once a week.
wow.
How'd you grade it? What was the grading?
You have a machine where you put one egg on a time in a roll that goes down, and it gets on this little scale that weighs it, and there's like 5 scales, and it gets to the first one. If it's real heavy, the jumbo egg falls off and rolls down, and then it's extra large, so one at a time, and not this. It's like this.
all day long.
Yeah.
Well, I never worked at the Lobster Pound,
Yeah.
but I did work for Matty Welch
There you go.
Well,
Yeah,
at the Beach Inn.
Yeah.
Jen,
The Beach Inn. There was a pictures there, you'll see a picture of it there.
We
Yeah.
got some pictures of it.
So Jane, tell us about school and where you went to school and tell us about the schoolrooms and some of your teachers and something like that.
Well, let's see, went to Lincolnville Central School, 2 grades to a classroom, there were 4 classrooms, and a big, long aisle, corridor. Let's see, Emily Johnson was my 1st grade teacher.
I don't have any hair because of that.
I know why, too. How many corners did you have to stand in? Okay, there's only 4 in the room, you know. But anyway.
You were in the other ones. I was.
I know, I was a good baby. Let's see, she was my 1st and 2nd grade teacher. Virginia Wilbur was my 3rd and 4th grade teacher.
She was a Rankin.
Yes, she was a Rankin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How many students?
Anywhere from, with the 2 grades, 30 to 40 kids in the room. Yeah. Yeah, 1 teacher, and boy, you behaved or else. I learned very quickly to behave because the rule was if I didn't behave in school, I got it twice as bad when I got home. So I was always a good little girl. And let's see, 5th grade, who was that? Collins, Mrs. Collins, yes. And then 7th grade was Earl Sprague, and 8th grade was Leroy Barker. And they both filled as principal as well for the school. But Christmas time was the best time of year there because each class had a special Christmas carol that they sang for the parents and people that wanted to come. We all stood out in this enormous hallway. It really wasn't that big, but it seemed huge to me. And we had fun. We had outdoor recess. I remember distinctly one recess in the middle of the winter. And there used to be a wooden backstop where we played baseball. And it was snowing to beat the band. And the wind was blowing. And I sat at the backstop in the lee and just watched the beautiful storm go by me, and it's one of my fondest memories of my whole life. I just felt completely at peace, and that's where I want my ashes to go.
So cool.
Where was the school?
Lincolnville Center, right where it is now.
Well, I had a little different journey. 1st grade was Lincolnville Central School, the 4th four-room schoolhouse, and it was kind of interesting because nowadays they call that multi-age classes, but back then they just jammed two grades per room. 2nd, 3rd, and 4th grade they transitioned to using Hope, so we used to get on the bus, ride to Lincolnville Center, and then get on another bus to ride to Hope. And it actually worked out better because you had literally one classroom per student. And then 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th, we were back in Lincolnville again. And I remember this big tall guy by the name of Wally. O'Brien, excuse me. Wally was our principal when I was in 8th grade. And Lincolnville was a fun school. And I will say last summer was the 50th, I don't know if you want to call it anniversary or whatever, of graduating from 8th grade. But we had a class reunion last summer of 8th grade students from Lincolnville. And out of the 27 to 30, depending on who you wanted to include because the people had moved and couldn't find or couldn't remember how they fit in, we had about 16 or 17 showed up for this class reunion and had a great time.
Was that when Jonathan came, Butterman,
Yes,
came back from New Mexico?
Jonathan
Yeah.
lives in in Rio Rancho,
Yeah.
and I've been out a couple times to his house, and great friend, 50 some odd years.
Lived at the beach.
He did. He grew up, in the Hurlburt field, and then they moved the house, and then they lived in what was the Quarter Cape
Randy Young asked.
Antiques, for those that remember when that was around. So, where Andy Young now has his property. So growing up in the schools, you rode the bus a lot. But you also learned to get your driver's license early so you could get to Camden, because most of us didn't want to ride that bus any longer at that point.
Well, I have a short little Christmas story. So, on the farm, you're not gonna spend money to go buy a Christmas tree. So you have to go up in the woods and find a Christmas tree. And while you're up in the woods, you cut off some other branches. So then when you go down, you put the Christmas tree up, you get out the drill, and you put branches on the tree that needs them.
Build your own.
And I remember one time it snowed, and it had snowed a little bit and everything. We woke up in the morning and it was above the windowsills in the farmhouse. We got over 2 feet that night. Kind of fluffy stuff, but it was a lot of snow. And of
So
course,
what about school, Steve? Tell them, what school
well, it's
is.
about the same as his, but you know.
But you had a couple of different teachers.
I had Earl Sprague for 2 years, and I had Emily Johnson for 2 years, and I would say,
What about Mrs. Chapin? You had Mrs.
yeah,
Chapin.
she was fine. And,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
And I had Mrs. Collins too,
Yeah.
I had Mrs. Hardy,
yeah.
spelled different. But the thing was, the teacher taught the 7th grade, and then he taught the 8th grade. You weren't supposed to be listening to him while he's teaching the other one. So one year thought we were gonna get smart, and we took his desk that used to be in front, as he sat down front, and we moved it up back. That was the worst mistake, because he could see everything we were doing, and we couldn't see, couldn't get away with anything. So, and
Cool.
Hang on, one memory I did wanna share was Lincolnville Central School. They used to have a big metal swing set, I don't know if what they did with that after they tore down the school. But being a young fella, there were 2 guys that always hung out together, Charlie Amborn, who grew up in the Elmer House, and David Barrows. And I remember they'd come out during recess and lunchtime and would push the younger kids on those swings. And you talk about feeling like you belonged with an older crowd when those guys would be out there pushing you. And you jump out, you get back in, and they would jump right back in and start pushing. And you talk about fond memories. And of course, we lost David here just a few years ago, but you know, that's when you really thought you were somebody important in Lincolnville, when those guys would come out and push you on those swings.
I got another one. So my dad and David Barrows both worked at Rankin's. And so David Barrows says to Dad, you know, I've worked at Rankin's longer than you have. And my dad says, I don't think so. He says, well, what do you mean? He says, well, you know, after I picked you up on the bus, you know where I went? To Rankin's.
That's right, Smithville drove the bus. Yeah. I don't have one.
You don't have it?
No. Was I supposed to bring
No.
questions?
Yeah. So, tell us what your parents did for work here, and in what years roughly. What did your parents do for work, Jane?
Lots of things. My father was mostly in construction after his teenage years. When he was a teenager, he was a blacksmith by trade, a lumberman. He went out to everybody's woodlots and cut lumber for them with his horses. And he'd take it, he'd cut his own lumber, trees I should say, take them down to Monroe's sawmill, have them fitted up as lumber. When he was 18 years old, he built the barn that still's up at the farm. He had the help of an older gentleman who sawed the boards for him. And Dad, the story goes that Dad would yell down from the top of the barn how long to make the board. The older gentleman would measure, cut the board, slide it up to Dad, and he says, "Nail her, boy, nail her." But that's what they did back then. And you probably remember, Mr. Thomas, about learning from the older folks in town. That's how the younger fellows learn their trades. My father did not finish high school. Ninth grade was the last year he had in this building. because he got a very bad ear infection or something, and anyway, he didn't like school much. So it didn't take much to keep him away. But he would go down to Camden where there was blacksmith shops, and he would sit there and learn and ask questions, and occasionally they'd let him do some of the work, and that's how he learned to be a blacksmith. And I'm not gonna brag, but he was very talented, very talented. I still have some of his work. After that, he'd get into, like I say, construction. He had a dump truck. I think he's built just about every road, or worked on every road in Lincolnville. Excuse me. 1952, Great Blizzard, he was the only person in the area with a V plow. And the state asked him to come and break out all the roads. And he was very happy to do that because all the men had to walk behind him and shovel the snow that came back down off the snowbanks into the road. And he was just, thought that was pretty good. He could sit in the truck and stay halfway warm. He wasn't in that much for heat, but, and he plowed for 20 years for the state, did Route 1. He'd be out for days and days, not like they do today where they get 8 hours and go home. Or, and he had to provide his own truck. They provided the plow, but he had to do his own cutter bars and stuff like that. It's just a lot of the little things that nobody does anymore.
And what about your mother?
My mother was a stay-at-home mom. 4 kids, 3 cows, 1 horse, 1 dog, 4 cats.
Only 4.
But then she became as
When she retired from being a housewife, she went to work for the Postal Service.
and she was.
Postmaster of Lincolnville Center,
Yeah.
after being a clerk at Lincolnville Beach. She got 20 years there, thank God she did it, because she got health insurance, and that kept mom and dad alive and healthy for quite a few years. So, but mom worked her butt off. I just, there isn't a person in here today that worked as hard as she did, I don't think. Every summer she can and freeze around 600 quarts of food. Well, there's 4 kids feeding 2 adults. What are you gonna do? We had no money to buy stuff per se, and you know what I mean. You know what I mean. And that's where I got my work ethic. All of us kids got it from our parents, and very glad for it.
Ready?
Jane,
Yes.
maybe tell us a little bit about your dad's blacksmith shop on the farm.
Well, it's not there anymore.
I know.
Okay. When he passed away, we all got together, meaning my 2 other sisters and I, and we donated it to something called the Curran Homestead in Orrington, where it's a living museum. They took it apart. He also built that when he was a teenager. And they moved it up there, and it's on display, and most of the original equipment is in there. They had to do a few things because, you know, the state says, oh, you can't have this, it's not safe, you know, but they got around it and got it going, and go up and see it someday. Tom Clyde Smithy.
Nice.
Did not know that.
Thank you. I
Still
forgot.
operating?
It can. I don't know how much they use it, but it's there. They have, the homestead is, they offer blacksmithing courses and stuff, so.
Don't they have Tom's loom?
Yes, my brother Tom's, weaving loom.
And he, when you told the story about your dad watching as a kid, when Tom decided to become a weaver, her brother, he was gonna weave rag rugs, and we found the loom, a big 6 foot wide loom, but he'd never woven before, he didn't know anything about it. He came over, he sat down next to me while I wove for an hour, watched how the loom worked. Said, oh, I got it. And he went home, and he sort of moderated the loom, or
Yeah.
modified the loom,
Got it in working order.
and he became my loom mechanic. And I could call him anytime my loom was acting up, because looms are weird and you just have to figure it out. And on the phone, he could diagnose my problem and tell me what to do. Yeah, and that was Tom.
Tell us about your parents.
When they first bought the farm, my understanding, it was a little before my time, they were one of the largest chicken producers or whatever in Lincolnville. They had, I think, between 80 and 100,000 chickens at one time. We had a couple chicken barns
So where were they?
right directly across the street from
Where
the
you can see the
farmhouse.
foundation.
And then I was told they had at least one somewhere down here at the beach, but before my time, and by the time I got up and about, the story I heard was they basically got squeezed out of the business back then, and the bigger chicken producers took over. So my dad ended up going to work as a machinist at a printing company in Rockland called Bonavada, and he was there for about 20 years. And then he ended up ultimately working at Tanglewood 4-H camp with Jim and Cindy Dunham, who were in the back, and I see the head nodding, which was perfect because he lived right there on the corner of the Tanglewood Road, and went out, and I think he was a handyman, jack of all trades. I will say, getting off topic just a little bit, but I was sitting at kitchen table having lunch one day. My dad was down, this is after my mom passed away, and I was complaining because of how much taxes I had taken out of my paycheck, because I was working in Rockland at the time and making very good money. And my dad looked up at me, and we were eating sandwiches, and he says, I don't know what you got to complain about. And I looked at him a little funny. He said, I never made $5 an hour in my life. I looked at my wife, I looked back at my sandwich, and I went back to eating and decided that was the end of that conversation. Because they raised 5 kids, so there's 7 of them. And as Jane alluded to, we always had big gardens, and we had to snap beans and
By the bushel.
buy the bushels and you name it. And I always tell people, the only difference between us and the poor people down the street, I didn't know any better. Because we always had plenty of green beans and corn, you name it, potatoes, and meat. Because not only was hunting good in the area, but I had a brother who was very good at hunting, and don't laugh at that, Alan. He had a tendency to bring deer home, so we always had a full freezer or two. So,
Year round?
excuse me?
Year round?
Oh, that would be illegal.
I cannot confirm or deny that. So I don't leave it. But my mom had worked at Sylvania's in Waldoboro when I was little, so my dad would end up watching us kids, so to speak. So we always did chores around the house. And then my mom ended up working at the sardine factories in Rockland, where she would box the sardines into, boxes. I don't know how many were in a case, but she did that for many years, as well as being, as Jane would say, hardworking. Both of them were hardworking, and you look back at what they made, but yet they made us a great home and a great place to grow up.
Great.
Number 48.
Steve,
Well, my dad worked pretty hard too, but I'm just gonna go down some of the list. He was a selectman, he was a fireman, he had cows, he had poultry, he graded the roads, he did weights and measures, he built a bridge on Slab City Road, just on and on.
How about constable?
What?
Constable?
Constable,
Drug
yeah,
road,
school
grain
bus
truck.
driver, he was always gone.
landscaper,
Landscaper, he was in the.
musician.
Yeah, he was a musician, he had grade school band, he started that.
Dancer.
Dancer, oh
Dancer.
God, I wouldn't go near a dance place, but he loved it. And just so many different jobs, but he really wasn't home very much in the evenings because he'd always had some meeting to go to, you know, different town meetings or to the Masons or here or there or what. So it kept him pretty busy. And my stepmother, she was a postmaster too in Lincolnville, and then she worked at the Camden Post Office. And she took care of us kids until she went into that. So
What year did your mother pass away?
55.
55.
Yeah.
And how many? And there was just 3 of you boys. You
Yes,
were, in 55. You were how old?
8, 7 or 8.
8,
8.
8, 7,
Yeah.
and 5 were
Yeah.
the 3 boys.
Yeah. So she passed away from breast cancer, and then my dad married the babysitter. So
Smart man.
so it was a interesting life, and it was.
Steve, you had the first television in the neighborhood at your house.
We had that because Bernard and Rachel got a new television.
Well, I remember watching the coronation of Queen Elizabeth,
Oh yeah,
1952, 53,
Yeah.
somewhere in there.
somewhere in
You
there.
could
Yeah,
barely see it.
yeah, a
from all
little
the
teeny
snow.
screen. Yeah,
But one of my fondest memories is watching that one.
yeah. Yeah.
So we're going to open this up for about 3 or 4 minutes. Does anybody have questions of any one of them? Yes, in the back.
Yeah, does anybody remember when the harbor would freeze over?
My father did.
I know.
He walked to Islesboro.
Yeah, and my father said they used to drive trucks over Arsboro.
Yeah, probably did.
Yes.
Oh my God.
My grandmother grew up in Duck Trap, and she went across on sleigh to Owlsboro, back and forth. So yes.
My grandfather grew up in Duck Trap, he did the same thing.
I think last time I saw Penobscot Bay freeze over was early 80s. It actually froze all the way to Islesboro. And then, of course, they'd get the Coast Guard out, break it up, so you wouldn't really want to try to walk across. But that was probably the last time I remember seeing the bay freeze.
Alan.
Was Tom Flagg your father?
You betcha. Yes, sir.
Yes. Yes.
Nancy Coulthard, what relation was she?
She is my aunt.
She was she was about my age, and I had to crash out on
One of how many, Alan?
Tell me more.
she didn't know it.
We have time for 2 more questions. Yes.
It's not a question, but a comment in regard to how hard everybody worked. A lot of you probably knew my grandfather, Roby Ames Sr.
Oh, yes.
Yep.
And he was a lobsterman, rode to all his traps. He had 100 traps and rode to all his traps. Had his second heart attack when he was 72 years old, rode ashore and walked up to the 100 yards up to the house and said, I think I'm having a second heart attack, and still lived to be 86. For those of you, you mentioned about the place in Bucksport, I just gave Diane tonight, in 1965, I think thereabouts, Mystic Seaport came up, and he was the last Atlantic salmon fisherman on the Maine coast, and he quit salmon fishing in 1949 because the bay was so polluted. And in '65, Mystic came up and bought his salmon shack and all his equipment, and it's on display. They restored it, and it's on display down there now. I think it's building number 11. It's the Ames Salmon, yeah. But one of my worst memories of Lincolnville, I live in Northport now, right? The next house, I'm the first house in Northport. But when I was about 10 years old, I think it was about 1955, there was the Goodrich house, which was up on the hill beyond your mom's house. Another family had bought it, and I was up visiting my grandfather that morning. And the kids from up there were down on the beach, and we were playing. That night, their parents had gone away with a baby, and it got a couple to babysit for the 3 kids, and the house caught on fire, and all 5 died.
Oh.
And the family moved away. They could never deal with that. But that was one of my worst memories about Lincolnville. And I had one other
But
story.
it was in Lincolnville, right?
Well, the house was in Northport, but my grandfather lived in Lincolnville. And one other story I just wanted to share is amusing. The first 10 years while I was at the university, I worked 9 months there, and then I was 3 months I ran children's camp. So the first year that I got done running children's camps for 12 months at the university, we joined a golf club there. And so one night there was a couples event, and so we were sitting there in dinner afterwards, and a couple were guests beside me, and the guy said, "Where are you from?" And I said, "Well, originally from Camden." I said, "I live in Old Town now." He said, "Oh, Camden, that's a beautiful spot." He said, "We go down to Lincolnville Beach to the Lobster Pound." He says, "We love it." And back this side of Lincolnville Beach, he says, a beautiful field overlooking the ocean, and some son of a bitch built a house right in the middle of it. I said, "Yeah, I think it's my mother and father." His wife gave him a little nudge, say, "Whoops, you just put your foot down out."
Sandy, last one.
Christmas, Steve had mentioned going up and getting a tree, of course, we wouldn't pay for one, we had to go get one. And my brother and I went up and we came back with the prettiest damn tree you ever saw. Man, it was beautiful. I brought it up the front yard. My grandfather walked out and says, "Get rid of that damn thing." What's the matter? Cat spruce.
Cat spruce.
For those of you who may not know, it's called the red spruce, but cat spruce by the locals. And if you bring it in where it's nice and warm, it will start to smell like a cat.
Well, thank you very much for coming. Thank you, people. Thank you, Corinne. Really appreciate Ken. We'll be back in February with another one of these. Also, don't forget the little bucket if you feel so inclined on your way out through. Diane and I will be able to eat next week if you bring that. So again, thank you very much. And if you have any other questions or comments, I'm sure these people will be glad to talk to you. Yes?
Do you have any problem with the bicycles?
I'm not going to talk about that right now. Thank you so much.